A boy who has a dog that no one can see. Every morning the food bowl disappears. Every night there are paw prints on the floor. Let's explore this story. The house stood hidden behind a row of old pine trees, where the morning fog always covered the mossy roof tiles. The family moved in one early autumn afternoon. The husband was wounded and retired from his technical job, and the wife left her city job to take care of their only son. The boy's name was Ben, 6 years old, quiet and withdrawn ever since an incident they didn't want to mention. They came here looking for a new beginning, peaceful and quiet, but that tranquility didn't last long. Something started to creep into their lives from the first week. Silently, strangely, every night. Ben would carefully place a small bowl of food in the corner of the room where the floor was slightly slanted and colder than other places. He did it regularly, quietly, without explanation. The mother thought her son was playing an imaginary game like any other child. But then when she entered the room every morning, the bowl was always empty. No rice crumbs, no sign of insects or rats, just empty. Then one morning, when the faint light filtered through the dusty glass, she saw a trail of dog paw prints, faint but unmistakable with metallic claw marks, printed on the thin dust covering the old wooden floor. The paw prints ran from the corner of the room, where the food bowl was placed, to the back door. No one in the house had a dog, nor was there any wild animal that could get into this locked house. She began to pay attention. Though she didn't say anything, something in the house made her uneasy. One early winter evening, when the wind started to howl through the cracks in the door, she walked into Ben's room after he had fallen asleep. The room was eerily quiet. Nothing was unusual, except a small object lying on the old wooden floor. A collar, old cracked leather, rusty buckle. When she cleaned off the moss and dust, she read the faded engraving, K9, Charlie, Shuckers 06 Sylvan. No one in the house had ever owned a dog. No one had ever mentioned a dog named Charlie. The collar was cold, as if it had just been pulled up from the ground, or somewhere it should have been. And even though there was no wind when she placed it down, the sound of metal hitting the floor echoed as if the room had been familiar with that sound for a long time. After that night, she no longer looked at the morning food bowl as a child's game, and when she accidentally saw the old records of the house, she discovered a detail that made her freeze. 5 years ago, a man named Owen, a former K9 officer, had lived right here. He went missing in an explosion while participating in a rescue mission in the western woods. His body was never found, and his dog, a K9 named Charlie, was presumed to have died with him. No one ever found its body. Some old houses carry the creaking of wood, sometimes a faint sigh of time. But some houses hold within them silence, not because they are old, but because something or someone never left. Their house was one of those places. The mother's name was Evelyn, and she didn't believe in the supernatural. Once a biology teacher, Evelyn was accustomed to explaining everything with logic. Molecules, cells, hormones, and behaviors. Evelyn believed in things that could be touched, measured, and quantified. But since the day the collar with the inscription K9, Charlie, Rouault 67, appeared in the empty room, her mind began to change. Not necessarily because of belief, but due to a mother's intuition that started to hear something her reasoning could no longer deny. She searched quietly. Every day when Ben went to school, Evelyn passed through the threshold of his room, feeling like she was trespassing in a relationship she couldn't fully understand, not between a child and imagination, but between a child and something more profound, a genuine soul. That morning the sky was darker than usual. The fog silently lingered on the window glass. As if unwilling to leave, Evelyn found an old property file in the cupboard left behind by the previous owner. At the very end, amid the frayed edges of the papers, was a handwritten note. Owen Kessler, K9 Officer, Unit 17. The name felt like it had been pulled from the bottom of her memory. Evelyn sat down, turned on the computer, and traced the scraps of online information. An old article appeared, its small, faint type and blurry photo still recognizable, a man in uniform sitting next to a black German shepherd, its intelligent eyes the body adorned in military armor with the embroidered label, Kaukanun 7. Charlie. The explosion occurred during a rescue mission for a missing mountain climbing team in the Rainvale Forest. The officer was never found, and the dog, according to a local, had been seen afterward returning to the old house at night, before disappearing forever. Something about the article made Evelyn feel like she was reading a part of the house's memory, a part the dust couldn't hide, a part that had chosen Ben. She didn't tell her husband, nor did she ask Ben anymore. Everything had become too fragile to put into words. Only one thing pushed Evelyn to act, a feeling that someone was waiting for her to find something unfinished. And so for the first time since moving in, Evelyn opened the basement door of the house. The key was exactly where the previous owner had left it, hanging next to the fireplace. The lock was rusty but still usable. Below was a wooden staircase, the air heavy as if a deep, unsung note lingered. She stepped down each footstep heavy as though walking into a memory that didn't belong to her. The weak flashlight beam swept over damp patches of the all, then stopped at an object covered in dust, an army surplus crate. The lid opened with some effort, just as her intuition had told her there were items once tied to life. A dog armor with a torn left shoulder, a military ID tag engraved with Charlie, and a sealed letter inside a plastic bag, the handwriting shaky but clear. Evelyn didn't read it right away. She sat still in the cold basement, staring at the small armor as if it were holding the shape of its long-lost owner. The armor smelled of rust. But behind that, there was something else, an unnamed scent. Like the smell of wind in the forest, or perhaps the scent of a road never returned to. Finally, she opened the letter. "If I don't return, please tell Charlie I am not sad or in pain. He is the only one who ever understood me without needing words. If he finds his way back, please let him stay, until someone needs him. And if that day comes, please don't stop him." Evelyn folded the letter. She didn't cry. She didn't say anything. She just looked up the stairs where the light from the kitchen filtered down like a hazy path. And there, right at the edge of the stairs, she saw a dog's paw print, clear, freshly made, imprinted on the thick dust as a silent confirmation. No wind, no sound, but Evelyn felt as if someone was sitting next to her, not to take back the past, but only to ask one question: can I leave now? That day, a sudden storm, all that was known was that the wind rose from the hill that night, carrying cold rain like shards of ice falling unevenly but persistently. The house, which had always been so quiet as if afraid to disturb the past, suddenly became heavy. The father didn't return in time. The rain blocked the only road connecting the town to the house. Evelyn stayed behind with Ben, and in her heart was an uneasy feeling, unsure whether it was due to the weather or the things she had read in the letter of a man named Owen and the invisible eyes of a dog who had died many years ago. Ben went to bed earlier than usual. He left his small bowl of rice in the familiar corner of the wall, carefully folded in an old towel, as if someone needed to eat it out of respect. Then he climbed into bed, wrapped himself in the blanket, and faced the door, as if waiting for something to come. Evelyn was in the kitchen when the lights flickered for the first time. A small click, seemingly harmless, came from the circuit box behind the house. She moved towards it, but was too late. A flash of light sparked, and then the smell of burning plastic spread thin but distinct. Smoke rose from the cracks in the old fireplace, a place she had never thoroughly checked. A piece of wire touched the rotting wood, and the fire, as if it had been waiting for a long time, just needed a reason to ignite. Evelyn ran up the stairs, but Ben's room door slammed shut from the inside. The doorknob was scorching hot, and the wood began to crack. She pounded on the door, calling for her son, but the wind howling outside mixed with the crackling fire, sounding like a senseless roar. There was no answer, only the creaking of the floorboards, slow, steady, as if someone was walking inside. The neighbors couldn't get there right away. The signal was lost, the road was blocked, and the house began to glow like a lantern burning out in the night. Let me know if you'd like to make further adjustments, or if there's anything else you'd like help with. But then amidst the chaos, something happened. Light as a breath, but stronger than any call. The door opened, not by hand, not by tool. Simply, it opened. And in the thick smoke, Evelyn saw Ben, standing in his sooty pajamas, one hand holding the collar, the other shielding his eyes from the smoke. He was pushed outside as though someone had guided his hand. Behind him, there was no one. But when Evelyn hugged her son tightly, her eyes still on the smoke-filled room, she saw a shadow flash past. Low, fast, and silent like the last breath, that shadow didn't reflect in the mirror. But the wooden floor, damp with the moisture from the fire hoses, still clearly showed the imprint of steel claws soaked and heading toward the stairs. The house wasn't destroyed. The fire only licked through the kitchen and living room, leaving charred marks, but not significant damage. They called it luck. But Evelyn knew. That wasn't luck, because after that night, Ben no longer set out food every evening. He still called Charlie's name, but no longer whispered in the corner. He slept deeper, no longer waking up, suddenly speaking in his sleep with words no one had taught him. And the strangest thing, the collar he had been holding on to was gone. All that was left was a faint light streak on the floor, exactly where the food bowl used to be. As if someone had left, this time forever. After the fire, the house became strange, not because of the scorched marks on the walls or the lingering smell of smoke in the wood, but because of the silence, complete silence. A silence that wasn't frightening, but also not quite normal. It was like the house had just exhaled its last breath after years of holding on to something beyond its capacity. Ben slept more soundly since that night. No more waking in the middle of the night. No more mumbling names in his dreams. The food bowls, which once disappeared regularly, now remained untouched the following morning. No more paw prints, no more warmth under the floor. Everything seemed as though it never happened. Only Evelyn found it hard to let go. Evelyn decided to review the footage from the old security camera mounted in the hallway on the first floor. This habit never seemed to serve any purpose other than to monitor the back door. She sat alone, the green light from the screen reflecting on her cheek, which had grown thinner after several sleepless nights. She rewound, played it backward, to the exact moment when everything began. The frame jolted slightly from the first tremor. Then black smoke started creeping into the lens, thick and suffocating. The lights flickered like they were about to go out. Everything turned blurry, static, and gray, and then it happened. A shadow flickered at the end of the hallway through the thick smoke like dust, moving without hesitation as if it knew the path in a collapsing place. The structure of that body was familiar, solid, a dog wearing canine armor reflecting the light for a moment, enough to see the engraving 067. Charlie. It did not hesitate. The shadow darted straight towards the closed door in less than a second, a swift, decisive movement, as if it had done this dozens of times. A quick turn and a front paw pulled Ben's leg, firmly dragging him down the hallway. At the same time, the door was flung open as though an invisible force had broken the lock from the inside. Immediately after, the frame shook violently and then shut off entirely. She didn't tell her husband or recount what she had seen, perhaps because she feared being considered delusional, or maybe simply because there are some things, if spoken, would lose something more sacred than an explanation. But inside, Evelyn knew clearly Charlie had gone, and because of that, she began to investigate. Not to confirm what she had seen, but to understand, to touch the root of that presence, because nothing, not even a soul, appears without bringing a connection. From old records, she traced a man named Marcus, the last comrade of Owen Kessler. They had served together in the K9 unit up north, and Marcus was the one who had helped bring back Owen's belongings after the disappearance. The man wasn't surprised when he heard the name Charlie. He said Charlie was not just a dog, it was a part of Owen. A being that never left. One time during a mission in the war zone, their vehicle flipped in a canyon. Owen was unconscious. Despite having broken bones, Charlie dragged himself over the rocky slope, taking nearly a day to find him. And that wasn't the only time it saved its owner. Charlie never knew how to surrender. Never. And Marcus said something that left Evelyn speechless. You know, Owen once had a son. His wife died after giving birth. The boy was sent to his sister in the city to be raised. The boy's name was Alva. Everything around Evelyn seemed to freeze. Alva, Owen's son. The boy grew up without knowing who his father was. He never heard stories from the battlefield. He never touched the armor or knew the name Charlie. Because life went on, the adults kept the past in silence. But it seemed Charlie did not. Evelyn couldn't remember how she drove home. She only remembered her hands shaking as she opened the basement door, where Charlie's armor used to be stored. Everything was still there. The box, the letter, and something new, an old photo neatly placed inside, as if someone had just put it back. In the photo was Owen younger, smiling gently, and beside him was a baby still in diapers. He held a collar engraved with the familiar words, Charlie, K9, do not remove harness. On the back of the photo was a faintly written line in blue ink. Although you will never remember your father, Charlie will never forget you. Evelyn sat silently for hours in the dark basement. There was no need for barking or wet paw prints. She already knew that Charlie had done precisely what Owen once believed to protect the child, until it was no longer needed. Some promises are never spoken. Some souls do not need to be named, because they always know the way back. There are truths. Even though no one is forced to say them once touched, they stay forever. Since Evelyn learned about the connection between Charlie and Ben, everything in the house became strangely gentle. Not the typical peace, but a sense of letting go, as if someone had gone very far, but left their coat on the door hook as a quiet way of saying, I'm still here, but I won't trouble you anymore. Ben no longer mentioned Charlie. He didn't call his name or place a bowl of food in the corner of the room, but he still occasionally looked out the window, especially when the wind blew, as if there was a subconscious habit that even he didn't recognize. Evelyn didn't ask anymore. Some connections once known to exist do not need explaining, nor do they need to be held on to. The storm came in late April. The weather forecast only noted a low-pressure system, but the people of the hills knew well no low-pressure system could blow away a steel roof like that. The rain poured relentlessly, and the wind howled as if someone was trying to push the invisible gates of the mountains. The three of them took refuge in the basement, the dim flashlight casting shadows on the damp walls, forming blurry shapes like old memories. From the crack near the ceiling, raindrops dripped steadily, slow and regular, each drop a minute of waiting stretching time. Amidst the sounds of wind and rain, Evelyn heard something familiar, unclear, not strong, just a breath, long, deep and steady, not human, not quite an object. When she opened the basement door to check the ground floor, everything had returned to silence. The rain had subsided, and the wind began to calm, but a single dog's paw print was on the doorstep, where water still pooled. There was no bowl of food, no creaking wood, no eyes from the shadows, just the paw print. And next to it, the old collar, the one Evelyn had once kept deep in the wooden box, was now neatly placed, as though someone had just set it down. No strangers had entered the house that night. No one had any reason to bring that collar outside. She sat down, her hand brushing against the worn leather. There was something warm, as if it had been left behind, but when she pressed her cheek to it, it was just a lifeless object, cold like everything that once held love. Since that night, Charlie never returned. No more paw prints, no more breath. There was nothing left to hold on to, except the quiet relief, like the breath after fulfilling a promise. Many years later, when Ben had grown up, he still kept the habit whenever it rained, standing by the window looking out into the yard, not waiting, but as if offering a greeting to something he had never seen again, but had never forgotten. The house was still there, but the paw prints had faded, and the collar, now in a small glass box on Evelyn's bookshelf, was just a keepsake. There is no longer proof, but sometimes on those light rainy nights when the desk lamp flickers with the wind and the wooden floor silently shrinks with the humidity, Evelyn still feels someone lying at her feet, quietly, faithfully, as they once had. A dog that had died, a promise never spoken, a soul that knew the way back. Just to finish the last thing, keep the boy until he no longer needs you. After the final storm, the house lay still as if it had breathed out its last whisper. Nothing happened after that. No strange lights, no odd noises, no signs anymore. Everything returned to normal, if you could call it normal, because they had now learned to see silence with a different eye. The boy, Ben, grew up in that old house with a piece of memory that no one ever forced him to carry, but he still kept. He never told stories about Charlie at school. He never drew pictures of the dog in his notebook. He never once boasted to his friends that he had been saved from a fire by a being no one could see. But on his 12th birthday, Evelyn saw him standing outside in the patch of damp earth where the rain had just passed. He wasn't playing, he wasn't running, he just bent down, gently, and placed a small white stone on the ground, exactly where the bowl of food had once been placed. No name tag, no monument, no one needed to know, just him, and a soul if it still lingered around. Evelyn grew older with the years. Her dyed hair had truly turned gray. The kitchen was renovated. The burnt smell from years ago only lingered in her memory, like a film that had been slowed down to its absolute limit. Occasionally, she would still open the old wooden box, now containing only 3 things that remained of Charlie's presence: the leather collar, the military tag, and the old photo with the inscription on the back. She no longer cried when she saw them. They are no longer proof of something strange, but a part of the family. As if someone had once lived with them, once watched over them every rainy night, once stepped into the fire, and then quietly left when no longer needed. No one saw Charlie walk away. No one heard the last footsteps on the wooden floor. There was only one thing left: the certainty that Charlie had once been here not as a ghost, but as the last guard of a promise. The story ends here. Not because the story is finished, but because the rest no longer needs to be told. Because sometimes the most profound things are not in the dialogue or actions, but in the silence left in the hearts of others. A faint paw print on the old wood, a bowl of food that never empties, and a boy who grew up in peace thanks to a dog no one ever saw. Some people don't need to be present in body to become family. Some dogs don't need to be raised to become guardians. And some paw prints, even though they've faded, are still the most unmistakable evidence of loyalty.